The night before my wedding, I slipped into my dress alone, no mother to zip it up, no sister to cheer, just me, the silence, and a message that shattered everything. You never really looked right in a wedding dress anyway. But what they didn't expect, what no one saw coming, was how that moment would ignite a wave of strangers around the world to stand by me. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most, this story is for you. The box was small square and wrapped with gold string that shimmered under the morning light spilling through Evelyn's studio window. She tied it with practiced precision, one knot a double loop, and then the wax seal she'd customized with her initials EM. There were 87 more to go. Each box held a jar of raw honey from a local farm, a lavender bath salt sachet, and a handwritten thank you card. Evelyn believed gifts should feel personal even for a wedding with over 100 guests, and especially because this one was hers. Evelyn Marks had been planning weddings for almost a decade. She'd orchestrated beach ceremonies in Santa Barbara, rustic affairs in Tennessee barns, elegant candlelit receptions in Boston libraries. She knew the mechanics of joy like a surgeon knew anatomy. But this was different. This was hers. She glanced at the guest list tacked on the wall beside her work table. In red were her parents' names, Joan and Carl Marks. Below theirs, her younger sister Romy and Romy's fiancé, Tyler. 4 names, 4 hopes, 4 chances to be seen. Jared walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're still working on the welcome boxes?" he asked gently. She nodded without looking up. "I want them to be perfect." "They will be," he said, setting the mug down beside her. "But I still think we should invite Sarah and Ben, and maybe Rachel from med school. You've been there for them. They'll want to be there for you." "I know," she murmured, "but I want it to be about family this time." Jared said nothing. He only placed a hand on her shoulder and left it there, a silent comfort. Evelyn had spent most of her adult life standing in the background of other people's big moments. Coordinating the music cue for the first dance, fluffing a train, before the aisle walk, whispering, "You've got this," into tearful ears before vows. She never envied her clients, never until now, because for once it was her turn. She'd flown her parents and sister in business class, paid for their hotel in advance, left a personalized itinerary in their rooms. She'd added touches she thought might soften old memories, like sourcing the same honey brand her mother used when they still lived in Vermont, and adding a flower pin to her father's welcome gift because he used to wear one every Sunday to church. She'd wanted them to feel like they belonged here, not out of duty, but choice. Like maybe if she wrapped this moment carefully enough, they would step into it. Stay, love her back. The last time they'd been in the same room as her was 3 years ago at her grandmother's funeral. Even then, Romy had taken center stage sobbing dramatically, while Evelyn stood alone near the organist, unnoticed. No one had asked about her promotion to head of events. No one had asked if she was seeing anyone. That day her mother had said only 6 words to her. "You look tired." "Are you eating?" But this time, Evelyn thought would be different. This time, she was the bride. This time, they couldn't possibly ignore her. The lavender scent from the bath salts wafted up from the open box. Evelyn leaned over it, breathing in deeply. Healing, they said. Calming. But her hands trembled slightly as she folded the final note card. "Thank you for being a part of our most meaningful day." She placed it on top, sealed the envelope, and closed the lid. That was the last box. Outside, the sunlight had turned from golden to pale. The day was slipping away, but she remained seated, staring at her work like it might reach out and hold her together. "Just one time," she whispered. "Just this once, please." It wasn't a plea to the universe. It was to her parents, to Romy, to people who had never really come through, but who she still hoped might surprise her. Because it wasn't just a wedding to Evelyn. It was a declaration that she was worthy of love, in the light, not just behind the scenes. It was a box she had packed and wrapped and labeled with the longing that this time they would show up. And for a moment, just one fragile moment, she let herself believe they would. The message came just after 10:03 p.m. Evelyn was in her robe brushing out her hair for the night, her phone face down on the vanity. When it buzzed again, a soft insistence against the wood, she flipped it over without thinking. Her heart stopped on the second line. "We're not coming to the wedding." "The sender, her mother." She blinked, reread it, and then the rest followed like a dam had cracked. Rami found a last-minute deal to Paris. We're going with her and Tyler instead. Couldn't say no to a good fare, and honestly, we all needed a break. Thanks for covering the flight costs, by the way. Super generous of you. Enjoy the big day. Evelyn's hands turned cold. She scrolled down. The final line. You never really looked right in a wedding dress anyway. Her breath caught in her throat. No sharp gasp, no sob, just a hollow implosion, like the quiet death of something that had tried too long to survive. She set the phone down gently on the vanity, as if handling something poisonous, and stared at her reflection. Her mouth trembled, but her eyes didn't cry. Not yet. The robe slipped from her shoulders as she walked slowly across the room to the garment rack where her gown hung. It was ivory satin, fitted at the waist, simple and classic, the kind of dress that whispered, not screamed. The kind she'd spent months choosing, picturing herself in it, not just as a bride, but as their daughter, finally radiant enough to be noticed. She stepped into the dress. No music, no applause, just the sound of the zipper drawing up her spine like a breath held too long. She didn't pin her hair, didn't put on shoes. She walked barefoot to the sitting room, sat on the edge of the armchair, and stared at nothing. The silence in the room was dense. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that wraps itself around you when the people who were supposed to show up decide you're not worth the journey. Her phone lit up again. Rami had sent a photo, her and their parents at the airport boarding passes, in hand wide grins like they were off to Disneyland instead of skipping a family wedding. The caption, Europe, small town vows, shash, sorry, not sorry. It wasn't just cruel. It was deliberate, and Evelyn felt it like a thread snapping inside her chest. She curled into herself slightly, but didn't cry. Not because she was strong, but because there was something beyond crying, something heavier, denser. Grief, not just for the moment, but for the lifetime of moments just like it. Birthdays spent alone, award ceremonies with empty seats, hospital visits with no calls. This wasn't the betrayal. This was just the confirmation. She looked around the room filled with flowers, ribbons, carefully packed gifts, monogrammed napkins she'd ordered with their initials, and realized the whole space was a love letter they never intended to read. From the corner, the grandfather clock ticked loud in the quiet. Evelyn leaned back in the chair arms, resting on the gown pooled around her. The fabric felt heavier than usual. Or maybe she just felt smaller. There were no second chances now, no miracle arrivals, no heartwarming last-minute redemption arcs. She was going to walk down the aisle tomorrow without them. The realization didn't bring rage. It didn't even bring despair. It brought stillness, sharp, sobering stillness, like stepping outside into snow and realizing slowly that the warmth you were promised isn't coming, and that maybe it never was. She reached for the veil hanging beside the bookshelf, draped it over her shoulders. It caught the lamplight in faint glimmers like dew. And then Evelyn sat in silence, in full bridal attire, barefoot and heart bruised, in the house she'd once hoped would be filled with family laughter. She stayed there for over an hour. No phone calls, no music, no tears, just a woman in a wedding dress learning how to grieve the living. The next morning, Evelyn poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table with a red pen. She didn't cry. Instead, she opened her guest list spreadsheet and calmly began to strike through names, 18 of them in total. Aunts, uncles, cousins who never called, who shared family photos on Facebook, but had never once asked how she was doing. They were all connected to the 4 people who had just chosen a Paris vacation over her wedding. If they couldn't see her worth, they didn't need to witness her joy. When she clicked save, it felt less like editing and more like a quiet revolution. She took a breath and opened a new document, this one titled, People Who Showed Up. Then she picked up her phone and started dialing. The first call was to Ms. Fenwick, her high school music teacher, the one who had slipped her a sandwich every time Evelyn stayed late to practice, the one who had written her a glowing college recommendation, even though Evelyn had no piano at home and practiced on paper keys. "Oh, honey," Ms. Fenwick said after a moment of stunned silence, "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Then she called Mara, her freshman roommate, who had once sat on the floor with Evelyn all night after her first family Thanksgiving alone, and Dr. Leland, her mentor at the hospital, who had stayed late more times than she could count just to talk through her fears when she was a new resident, terrified of messing up. Each yes she received stitched a piece of her back together. By noon, the new guest list was full, not just of names, but of stories, of people who hadn't shared her blood, but had shared something deeper: presence, consistency, care. She looked at the list and realized this was her real family, the kind that called on birthdays, the kind that showed up to help move apartments, the kind that didn't vanish when life wasn't convenient. Her phone vibrated with a new message from Romy. "Hope your backup guests are as classy as your wedding favors. Mom says they smelled like cheap soap." Evelyn stared at the screen, then deleted the message without replying. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. She was awake. Because now she could see the pattern for what it was. She remembered the times she had covered Romy's tuition shortfall. The time she loaned their dad money for a medical bill he later confessed was for golf club membership. The night her mom had shown up crying about a foreclosure notice and Evelyn had written a check without asking for the full story. All those moments had been folded into her memory like paper cuts too small to bleed, but not small enough to forget. And now here they were, using her generosity to fund a vacation, mocking her on the night before her wedding. No more, she thought. She scrolled through her email and sent quick updates to the caterer and planner, adjusting meal counts and seating charts. There would be 18 empty seats. No correction. There would be 18 better-filled seats. She printed name cards for each of the new guests, calligraphy with gold ink, a style she hadn't used before. It felt elegant, bold, unapologetic. She placed the cards one by one into a folder, and as she did, a memory surfaced: an old family photo taken at Romy's high school graduation. Evelyn had been there, camera in hand, but not in the photo. She remembered standing just out of frame, holding Romy's purse, smiling like it didn't sting. She'd been the invisible one for so long, the quiet helper, the reliable wallet, the good daughter who never asked for anything in return. Now, she wasn't asking. She was choosing to surround herself with people who didn't just smile for photos, but held her hand in the background when no one else was watching. That night, she put the photo on her desk and drew a thin red frame around where she would have been had someone turned the camera. And then she flipped it over. Tomorrow, she would take new photos with the people who saw her fully and clearly, not as a background figure, but as the woman standing in the center, finally unashamed of taking up space. The morning after Evelyn finalized her new guest list, she met Jared in the garden, where rows of folding chairs were already being set up beneath strings of soft, golden lights. She handed him a fresh list of names. Replacements, she said, her voice calm. He glanced at it, then at her. "It's a better list." She smiled softly. "It really is." Together they walked through the space, measuring not just the dimensions for seating, but the energy who would bring warmth, who would fill the silence with presence, not pretense. Evelyn no longer wanted a wedding built around obligation. She wanted one grounded in reciprocity. She didn't need to impress. She needed to belong. They made changes. Gone were the reserved rows for immediate family. Instead, the first seats would be filled by the people who had actually earned the title, her chosen ones. Ms. Fenwick would be seated up front beside Dr. Leland and Mara. They would be the ones to witness her vows. Jared hired additional security just in case. He didn't say it aloud, but they both knew it wasn't an overreaction. Evelyn's parents had a history of showing up when it was most inconvenient, never to support but to reclaim control. "Do you want to file a no-contact order?" Jared asked gently. Evelyn shook her head. "Not yet, but I want them nowhere near this ceremony. Then we'll make sure they're not." That afternoon, she opened the box of wedding accessories. In one corner lay a silver hairpin with 3 small pearls and a cracked amethyst gem. Her mother had given it to her when she was 12. "You can wear this on your wedding day," she had said back then. It was your grandmother's. Evelyn had held on to it all these years through moves and heartbreak and silence. She'd never worn it, but she hadn't thrown it away either. It had stayed in a drawer waiting for a moment that might finally feel like hers. Now holding it again, she didn't feel nostalgic. She felt resolved. She didn't keep the pin because it was a family heirloom. She kept it as a marker of contrast, a reminder that legacy doesn't define worth, and inheritance doesn't equal love. She decided to wear it, not to honor the woman who gave it, but to honor the girl who kept it through every unkind season. In the mirror, she fastened the clip into her hair with quiet determination. It didn't sparkle. It didn't need to. It stayed in place like a badge of choice. She no longer needed her family's permission to celebrate her own life. The next day, Evelyn stood inside the bridal suite finalizing the seating chart. The planner, a friend and colleague, came in holding a clipboard. "We're good to go," she said. "Security knows the names. If your parents or sister show up, they won't get past the gate." "Thank you," Evelyn said, looking her in the eyes. "You're protecting your peace. That's not petty. That's powerful." The words hit gently like a balm she didn't know she needed. She added the final touch to the reception space, a small table titled, "In Honor of Those Who Chose to Stay." It held framed photos of her and Ms. Fenwick at her piano recital Mara in their dorm room with instant noodles Dr. Leland beside a whiteboard scribbled with complicated diagnoses during Evelyn's first year of residency. The table was quiet, but it hummed with meaning. These were the moments no one had clapped for the people who had lifted her when she was invisible. It was a family tree, rooted not in blood, but in commitment. Outside, the sun began to lower, turning the sky into a watercolor wash of apricot and rose. Evelyn stepped out in her dress, not the one her mother would have picked, not the one Romy would have approved. It was the one she loved. It fit not just her body, but her story. She felt no absence in the air, only fullness. For the first time, her life didn't feel like a performance hoping to win an audience. It felt like a declaration made to those who were already clapping. The day after the wedding, Evelyn sat at the breakfast table with a cup of Earl Grey, the veil from the night before, folded neatly beside her like a relic. Jared had gone out for bagels. The house was still sunlight, dusting the hardwood floors. Flower petals scattered from bouquets that guests had taken apart and playfully tossed after midnight. She picked up her phone and opened her photo gallery. There it was, her favorite image. She stood in the center of the frame, smiling with her eyes closed, hands loosely joined with Ms. Fenwick on one side and Mara on the other. Dr. Leland was behind her, laughing mid-sentence, while Jared stood just out of frame, holding a tray of cupcakes and grinning like a man who had just won the quietest, grandest lottery. It wasn't the most polished photo. The light flared slightly, someone's elbow was blurry, but it felt alive. And more than that, it felt true. She opened Instagram. Caption: "They told me I didn't belong in a wedding dress. They didn't show up. These people did. The ones who stayed when no one was watching. I used to think family was something you were born into. Now I know it's something you build with love, loyalty, and choice. Thank you for choosing me." She hesitated only for a moment before tapping post. Then she set the phone down, folded her hands, and waited not for approval, not for applause, but for the feeling that came next. Within the hour, the post had over 1,000 likes. By midday, 10,000. Comments poured in from strangers. People writing from Ohio, from Sydney, from Cape Town. Some simply typed thank you. Others shared their own stories of birthdays spent alone, of parents who showed up only for photographs of siblings who had disappeared the moment life got hard. This made me cry in the best way. My mother told me I wasn't wedding material either. You are healing me right now. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who doesn't walk away. Some people reposted her words with their own photos captioning them, the ones who stayed. It wasn't viral in a celebrity way. It was viral in a human way, a quiet ripple of healing. Then came the message. From her father's number, Didn't realize you were the type to air dirty laundry online. That post was low. And then from her mother. We're still your family, Evelyn. You didn't have to humiliate us to feel strong, followed of course by Romy. You think likes on a sad post make you better than us, grow up. Evelyn stared at the messages, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. And then she did the most radical thing she could think of. She didn't reply. She screenshotted each message and dropped them into a folder she'd titled, "In Case It Gets Worse." Then she blocked all 3 numbers. No long explanation. No need to justify her silence. Some truths didn't need defending. They just needed space to breathe. Later that afternoon, Jared returned, handed her a toasted sesame bagel, and kissed her temple. "Your post is everywhere," he said, scrolling through his phone. "You started something." Evelyn nodded. "It feels weirdly peaceful." He looked at her thoughtful. "You didn't just get married yesterday. You got free." She smiled, a little unsure, a little amazed. "Is that allowed?" "Absolutely," he said. "Especially when the wedding was never the cage, it was the doorway." That evening, she walked alone into her office and lit a small candle beside the framed photo from the post. She whispered not to the photo, not to the people in it, but to the part of herself that had once believed Sile. "You were wrong," she said softly. "Telling the truth doesn't make you cruel. It makes you real." The flame flickered in agreement. It was 3 days after the wedding when Evelyn's doorbell rang. She had just come in from the garden, hands still dusted with soil from planting lavender beside the back fence. Jared was upstairs, unpacking the last of their wedding gifts, cutting boards, monogrammed towels, a stand mixer that neither of them had asked for, but would definitely use. The bell rang again, longer this time. She wiped her hands, glanced out the window, and froze. Her father, her mother, Romy, standing on her front porch like they belonged there. Jared appeared at the top of the stairs, catching the expression on her face. "Want me to get it?" She shook her head slowly. "I need to do this." When she opened the door, they didn't greet her. Her father pushed forward a manila folder. "This is about the house," he said, voice curt. "We've reviewed the deed. It was technically purchased under the family trust years ago. Romy has a claim. We just need your signature to release the title." Evelyn looked at the folder, then up at the 3 faces that had ghosted her before the most important day of her life. She said nothing. Her mother stepped in softer. "It's not personal, sweetheart. We just thought it was fair. Romy's planning to move soon. You've already had your moment." Romy stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes defiant. "We're not here to fight, just to finalize things like adults." Evelyn blinked once. Then slowly, calmly, she opened the folder, scanned the first page, and without a word tore it in half. Then in half again. And again. She dropped the pieces in the ceramic dish by the door, meant for spare keys and dried eucalyptus. Her father's face darkened. "This is legal, Evelyn. We can take this to court." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Do that," she said quietly. "I have the full purchase records. And you know what else I have? Proof that the trust was closed when you tried to borrow from it for a ski timeshare in Aspen." Her mother gasped slightly. "That's not relevant." "It's pattern," Evelyn replied. "And I'm done letting patterns pass as parenting." Jared appeared silently beside her, a quiet pillar of presence. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Her father took a step forward, but Jared simply shifted his weight, one arm subtly angled to protect her without making a show of it. "You're not welcome here," Evelyn said. Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was simply done. Romy scoffed. "All this over a wedding. You're seriously holding a grudge because we didn't want to fly in for a cupcake party." "No," Evelyn said. "I'm holding a boundary. There's a difference." They stared at her, waiting for the familiar breakdown, the tears, the pleading, the apology she'd always handed them even when she was the one bleeding. But Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't beg. She closed the door. On people who mistook silence for weakness, on manipulation wrapped in blood ties, on the myth that love required you to endure disrespect just because someone shared your DNA. Inside, she sat down on the living room couch, heart steady, hands still. Jared brought her a glass of water. "Want to talk about it?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not today." He nodded, sat beside her, their knees just touching. Outside, she could hear a car door slam, tires rolling down the street, and just like that, they were gone. No yelling, no scene, no vengeance. Only peace and paper scraps in a bowl by the door like confetti from a celebration of self-worth. Evelyn took a long sip of water and smiled, not because it was over, but because she had ended it on her terms. She didn't need to prove anything to them. She didn't need them to know she'd won. She only needed to remember how it felt to choose herself quietly, firmly, fully. The wedding was set for golden hour. The ceremony space had been transformed into something between a garden and a dream. Soft music, woven lanterns, hanging from trees, rows of guests, dressed in muted tones, murmuring softly in anticipation. Evelyn stood inside the bridal suite, her dress cascading like a waterfall of silk around her. Her hands were steady. "Security check-in is complete," the planner reported. "Guests only, no unexpected visitors." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you for being thorough. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation." 3 days earlier, she'd filed a restraining order, not out of vengeance but caution. She didn't want a scene. She didn't want to spend the most beautiful day of her life wondering if someone might try to reclaim a place they had already abandoned. She wanted to walk down the aisle without looking over her shoulder. And so, she built her boundary like she'd built everything else in her life, quietly, precisely, and with care. At 4:17 p.m., just as the processional music began to drift across the lawn, a car pulled up at the estate's front gate. A silver sedan. The security team, dressed in black polos and calm professionalism, stepped forward as the doors opened. Her father, her mother, Romy. They were dressed as if they belonged. Suits, pastel chiffon, makeup done. "Too late. I'm afraid I can't let you through," one of the guards said. "You're not on the list." "We're family," her mother snapped. The guard didn't blink. "You're also subject to a no-contact order for the duration of this event. This property is private, and you'll need to leave." Romy tried to push forward, waving her clutch. "You don't understand, this is a mistake. She needs us there." Inside, Evelyn stood at the top of the path, unaware of the exact exchange, but completely sure it was happening. She could feel it like a shift in weather, familiar turbulence brushing against her boundary, testing it. But nothing reached her. She adjusted her veil. Outside, her father's voice rose. "This is ridiculous. We have every right to be there." "We're her family." "You had your chance," the guard replied evenly. "You made your choice." The security team didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Boundaries, when set properly, didn't have to scream. Eventually, the family got back into the car. No police, no shouts, no begging. Just the slow reversal of tires crunching gravel as they drove away from a moment that no longer needed them. Back on the lawn, Evelyn took Jared's arm. They were hidden from view by a tall row of lilacs waiting for the cue. "You ready?" he asked, voice warm. She nodded, and when the music changed, she stepped into the light. The guests stood. Not for tradition, not because it was expected, but because every person there had chosen her, and she had chosen them. As she walked, she didn't think of the people who weren't present. She didn't wonder if they'd regret it, or if they'd watch the photos online and feel the echo of what they missed. She didn't think of Romy's voice or her father's entitlement or her mother's silence. She only thought of the breeze, soft and kind, on her shoulders. She only saw the faces, Ms. Fenwick tearing up Mara, beaming Dr. Leland, nodding like a proud uncle. She walked like someone who had come home. And when she reached the altar, the sunlight hit her just right, soft gold on skin veil, glowing hands open and unshaking. There was no drama, no scene. Just a bride stepping into her life unencumbered by ghosts, unshaken by guilt. She didn't need to turn around. She didn't need to look back. The gate had held. The sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the grass as Evelyn stood beneath a canopy of soft white fabric and blooming dogwood branches. The ceremony was simple. No towering arches, no grand procession. Just friends, laughter, and love, blooming like the petals scattered on the aisle. Jared stood beside her, eyes locked on hers, not with the flash of adrenaline, but the steady, grounded warmth of someone who had seen every side of her and stayed. The officiant, a retired doctor and friend from the hospital, began with a story. I remember Evelyn once stayed up all night just to sit with a patient who had no family. Not for credit, not for duty, just because she couldn't imagine anyone leaving a person alone on a hard day. There was soft laughter in the crowd, nods. She didn't say much that night, the officiant continued. She just showed up. That's Evelyn. And that's what makes today so fitting, because today we're all showing up for her. Evelyn blinked back a rush of tears. Not the kind she'd feared, those heavy, grief-laced drops she'd spent a lifetime hiding. These were different. These were joy-shaped. She looked out over the rows of chairs and saw not just attendees, but witnesses. There was Mara, smiling through tears, wearing the same cardigan she had loaned Evelyn during their freshman winter when heat had gone out in their dorm. There was Ms. Fenwick, still proudly holding her old music folder like a talisman, mouthing every line of the vows, as if she'd rehearsed them in private. There was Dr. Leland, standing slightly off-center, arms folded, wearing his late husband's tie as a tribute, and giving Evelyn a subtle thumbs up like she was presenting a flawless case. These weren't guests. They were architects of the woman standing in white. Each had held a piece of her story. Each had shown up when others didn't. Each had offered something: shelter, advice, laughter, or simply presence. For so long, Evelyn had believed herself alone in the world, or worse, invisible. The kind of person whose triumphs went uncheered, whose pain went unquestioned. But today, in this golden hour, she saw clearly she had never been alone. She had simply been looking in the wrong direction, not toward the ones who left, but the ones who stayed. The ceremony continued. Vows exchanged. Rings slipped on with trembling fingers. The kiss gentle, steady, sacred. Not a climax, but a beginning. Afterward, the reception unfolded with understated grace. Long wooden tables lined with candles, string lights, swaying in the soft breeze music from a cello and guitar duo playing under a maple tree. Toasts were made. Mara raised her glass first. Evelyn once told me she didn't know what home felt like. She said voice-catching. And today, I realized she is home. For all of us. A chorus of hear, hear followed. Later, Ms. Fenwick pressed a small envelope into Evelyn's palm, a faded program from her first school recital with a sticky note attached. This is the day I knew you'd grow into something breathtaking. Thank you for proving me right. Evelyn didn't need a spotlight that evening. She glowed from within. Under the soft canopy of twilight, she watched her friends dance, laugh, hold each other. There were no Instagram influencers, no estranged aunts offering backhanded compliments, no one measuring her worth against an outdated family narrative. There was only music and love and the unmistakable sense of arrival. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. Her presence here was not the result of anyone's permission. It was the result of her own choice, deliberate, hard-won, sacred. She had rewritten her story without needing a publisher. She had thrown a wedding without needing approval. And in doing so, she had affirmed the one truth that had taken her a lifetime to learn. Being chosen by others is not half as powerful as choosing yourself. 2 weeks after the wedding, Evelyn posted a new photo. It wasn't polished or posed. There were no sweeping backdrops, no dramatic filters. Just her barefoot in her garden, standing beneath a small arch of ivy. She wore her wedding dress creased slightly from the way she'd folded it over a chair the night before. Her hair was pinned loosely, wisps escaping in the wind. She looked like a woman who had just stepped out of something sacred. The caption was short. "This is the dress they didn't want to see." Within an hour, the photo had gone viral. Again. But this time it wasn't just sympathy, it was solidarity. Thousands of comments poured in. "You are the bravest bride I've ever seen. This photo says more than any speech ever could. You turned grief into grace. Thank you." Evelyn read each one slowly, not to absorb the praise, but to feel the collective hum of connection. People from every corner of the world were writing not just to her, but to themselves through her. And then the messages changed. A woman named Danielle commented publicly, tagging Evelyn and writing, "My cousin works with Romy's fiancé. There's talk that Romy used their joint family fund for the Paris trip, and now his parents are livid." It sounded like gossip, until screenshots began circulating. Email threads, bank statements leaked anonymously, all tracing back to one fact: the money Romy used to book the Paris tickets had come not from her own account, but from a family trust, one that wasn't legally hers to access. Worse, it had been earmarked for her fiancé's grandmother's medical bills. The internet turned. What had started as curiosity now became outrage. You ghost your sister's wedding and steal from a cancer patient. Blood doesn't make you family. Behavior does. Romy Marks is everything wrong with entitlement. Even members of the extended Marks family began posting cryptic distancing messages. Jared's aunt, who had always been cordial but reserved, posted Evelyn's wedding photo with the caption, "When grace meets boundaries, beauty blooms." The public didn't just support Evelyn, they shielded her. They didn't need her to explain herself. They did it for her. Meanwhile, Evelyn said nothing. No second post, no rebuttal. No rebuttal to Romy's attempt at damage control, which came in the form of a now-deleted TikTok where she tearfully claimed the wedding drama was exaggerated, and she just needed a break from toxic family dynamics. Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to. The story had evolved beyond her. The truth, once whispered, had become its own echo. And for the first time in her life, she realized something profound. You don't have to scream the truth for people to hear it. You just have to stop hiding it. Late one night, she sat on the porch with Jared watching the sky melt into stars. He handed her a folded article from a lifestyle magazine. On the front page was her wedding photo with the headline, "The Bride Who Drew a Line and Found Her People." Evelyn laughed softly. "I never thought I'd be front page material." "You weren't trying to be," Jared said. "That's why it mattered." She folded the article and tucked it away, not for fame, but for memory. A reminder that dignity once chosen ripples farther than drama ever could. She thought back to the message her father had once sent. "You didn't have to humiliate us to feel strong." But that was the thing. She hadn't humiliated anyone. They had simply exposed themselves. All she did was stand still while the truth took the microphone. And when the dust settled, when the stories had cooled and the internet had moved on, Evelyn remained unchanged at her core, but no longer invisible. Not because she had fought for the spotlight, but because she had finally stepped out of the shadows. The mornings were slower now. Evelyn liked it that way. She and Jared had moved into a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, not far, but far enough to hear birdsong in the morning instead of traffic. The house wasn't big, but it had what mattered: a sunlit kitchen, a garden with stubborn wildflowers, and a bookshelf that reached the ceiling. Most days, Evelyn woke before the alarm. She made tea jasmine or Earl Grey depending on her mood and sat by the window with her notebook. Not for work, not for planning. Just thoughts. Just stillness. One Tuesday, she received a letter. Handwritten. The envelope bore a familiar return address, an old high school where she'd once spoken about resilience. Inside, a girl named Mia had written, "I read about you. I thought I was invisible too. Now I'm applying to medical school. I just wanted you to know your story saved me." Evelyn held the letter gently as if it were fragile. And maybe it was hope after all, often came wrapped in the thinnest paper. She smiled. The scholarship fund she had started with Jared, the Quiet Legacy Foundation, was small, but it was growing. Each year it supported girls like Mia, girls who had been told they weren't enough, girls who'd learned like Evelyn that being overlooked didn't mean being incapable. She didn't need her name on a building. She just needed it on that check. Her name. She had thought once about changing it, cutting ties, making a clean break from the bloodline that had hurt her so deeply. Friends had suggested it. Lawyers said it was simple. Jared had offered to support whatever she chose. But when the forms arrived, she had paused. Not out of sentiment, not out of fear, but out of ownership. The name Evelyn Marks had once felt like a cage. A shadow. A reminder of every door slammed, every text ignored, every birthday passed with silence. But now it was hers. Not because they gave it to her, because she chose to keep it, to rewrite it, to wear it like armor, not shame. That morning, she stood in front of the mirror, hair unbrushed, a loose cardigan draped over her shoulders. No makeup, no audience. She looked at herself. Really looked. No longer the daughter waiting at the window. No longer the sister begging for space. No longer the invisible girl trying to shrink herself into worthiness. Just Evelyn. And for the first time, that was enough. Jared stepped into the doorway, toothbrush in hand. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft with familiarity. She nodded. "Just thinking." "About?" She smiled at their reflection. "How lucky I am to have arrived here. Exactly here." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm the lucky one." Later, she went outside to water the garden. The lavender had bloomed again, thicker this time. There were bees in the basil, and the tomatoes had started climbing without being told. Nature, she thought, doesn't ask for permission to grow. It just grows. She looked around at the life she'd built. Not just the house, not just the marriage, but the woman, the community, the peace. She didn't need applause. She didn't need vindication. She had the quiet kind of freedom, the kind that comes when you stop needing others to believe your story and start living it anyway. Inside the mail sat unopened. Among the envelopes, a magazine lay folded to a feature titled "The Modern Matriarch: How One Woman Reclaimed Her Story Without Retaliation." She didn't need to read it. She already knew the ending. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spectacle. It was a woman named Evelyn, standing in her garden with dirt under her nails and sunlight on her skin, free, full, and finally seen. Not because anyone else had named her, but because she had named herself.